Manny, it's a pleasure to introduce you today and really grateful for you and Evolution Mining for being here. So Manny is the Metallurgical Superintendent at Evolution Mining Cowal operations. Manny's had an extensive background in the minerals processing industry across the globe, working in countries like India, Africa, PNG, and for the last 11 years in Australia. Using his whole toolkit to deliver performance improvements, whether that be first principles techniques, as well as implementing technology across unit operations, also including software. Those are all focused on driving productivity improvements, recovery, downtime, throughput, the likes. So Manny, you're going to be joining me today in a fireside chat. You're going to share some of your experience. We're going to refer back to some of the concepts that Alex introduced, and we're going to focus on the real-world application based on your experience. So please, on behalf of Mipac and everyone in the crew, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dom. It's great to be here.
So for those that are not familiar with Evolution Mining, can you please just give a brief intro, Evolution Mining, and then specifically Cowal operations as well?
Yeah, sure. Evolution Mining is mainly on the gold mining, and they have 6 different operations. Out of that, 5 operations in Australia, and Cowal is one of the operations, and it seems to be the flagship operation for Evolution Mining. And specific to Cowal, we have a conventional gold processing operation, which includes the circuit with flotation. It's a single stage flotation, and then the flotation concentrate goes to leach, and then we have the leaching, and also the flotation tails also goes to float tail leach, and then finally we have the carbon. It's actually carbon in leach. Carbon goes to our elution circuit, and then we have the gold room to make the final bullion. So unlike some of the other operations, it doesn't produce concentrate. The final product is only gold bullion.
And Alex mentioned global tariffs that Trump's introducing at the moment, and the gold price is very high, so you're very happy at Evolution right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole team is so happy, and it's going great.
Good.
Hopefully it stays this way.
Thank you, Trump. All right, let's jump straight in. There's a perception that mining is risk averse. What's your take?
Yeah, so obviously mining is perceived as a more conservative industry, and rather than saying more risk averse, I would say more of risk aware, being more cautious and also pragmatic in terms of making a decision. Obviously the stakes are quite high. Any incorrect decision can lead in millions and even sometimes billions of dollars wasted. While we're saying that, like we at Cowal, we still adapt some technologies, and when the fundamentals are clear, and also we have a true business case, definitely we can make some decision confidently. And as an example, we implemented few technologies at Cowal, the Mipac MPA, we have T-Card and IntelliSense, also Manta control, and few other technologies on site. So obviously we can, once we have a strong business case, obviously, as Alex said, touching base with our strategic vision and goal, we should be able to make the decision confidently.
You mentioned quite a few tech just then, 4 of. There's a lot of others. Maybe those 4 that you mentioned, can you just share briefly what they're about and how you're using them at Cowal?
Yeah, maybe starting up with Manta control. Obviously, people along in the comminution process might know about Manta control. It's more for stabilizing the mill throughput and also optimizing and maximizing the mill capacity in terms of its power. And also the Mipac, we have this MPA. So MPA is a platform that we've been using for more of a production reporting. And the way it actually helps is the value proposition comes in terms of like we have a KPI and monitoring system, and also it delays our, so it actually reduces our response time when there is a process upset happens. So, and also in terms of our meta accounting is done in Excel based. So there is no audit trail that can be tracked, whereas our MPA reporting system feeds into our meta accounting. So if any comments or any changes to be done, we'll put the comment that will actually go as an audit trail. And also the T card, one of the things that we've been using is around task management it's a platform we are using, and that captures it actually improves overall operational efficiency by capturing all the repetitive tasks so that it does not get missed out by the crews. And also in terms of comparing different crews' performance, we can able to track which crew is doing those repetitive tasks, if there anything is missed out. So it's really helpful in tracking that. And also latest one is the IntelliSense, which is really, I would say, more of a bold decision or a step taken by Evolution in terms of giving it a go. It's a AI-driven platform where we can able to predict the feed, predict the response of the plant through optimizing our feed and the blending of the O. And it's been rolled out in multiple stages. So those are the technologies we have.
Cool. And so there's quite a few technologies. They all overlap in some way. How did you go about building the roadmap to decide when to do what?
Yeah, so building the roadmap actually start up with the vision and aligning it with the strategic objective. And also it comes down to the business case, how the value proposition comes into it. So obviously that will be the number one, and obviously starting up with why. So that's gives us the why. And going forward, the next sequential step is to understand, assess the data, what we have, and understand where the baselines are. And once we understand the baseline, we can evaluate options, like what are the options we got, and how does it can be implemented in terms of the feasibility of that. And then based on that, we will engage the right stakeholders and form the team and create the FOMO, and probably we can roll it out into the business. And obviously, one of the other challenges, as you mentioned about overlap of the technology, is really good. We've been seeing the technology companies are willing to collaborate, and they were able to overlap some of these technologies, and we are pretty happy about the business partners we have engaged with.
What's an example of that?
Maybe with the IntelliSense and Millrock. So Millrock is provides a dashboard. They optimize the mill performance. When I talked about the IntelliSense, they can able to build based on the trucking. We have all the ore properties. They all can be tracked. So from the mine, when it comes to the stockpile, we can able to see what is that blend that's going to feed into the plant. And they did another part of it. So from the feed, they actually optimized and sort of a predictive model control. They had flotation and leaching part integrated into their model. So the missing component, if you look at our process flow sheet, we have the stockpile, and then now in between we have the comminution, and then the leaching and the flotation and leaching. So the missing part was done by Millrock, but when we wanted to integrate these two systems, so they all function together, so which understand the feed, the comminution part of it, and the flotation and leaching. So they both are very happy to work together, even though there are some in terms of like a conflict of interest at some point, but they are happy to integrate and look at what is their battery limits are, and they're working together. We haven't fully formalized it, but the things are in progress, and both teams are happy to work on it.
So a good tip when selecting a partner and vendor is collaboration across parties. You've mentioned a few companies, Millrock, who is Alway?
Yeah, it's a part of Alway.
IntelliSense, which is IntelliSense, Mipac, and there was one other in there.
Manta Control.
Manta Control.
And Molycop.
And Molycop, yeah. So quite a few. What's your view on a one-size-fits-all solution? Could you go and pull all those different things off the shelf? Why did you select multiple?
Yeah, obviously every site is different, either in terms of their ore properties, geology, and their company culture, and geographically where they are located. So there's so many components to it, even within the same company. So within Evolution, so what works for Evolution doesn't work for Northparkes. Whatever that works for Northparkes doesn't work for Ernest Henry. So every site is pretty much has to be treated on its own as a separate entity. So it's all about how we can able to understanding their objective, and we have to deliver on what is required. It's more about the meeting the customer expectation, and every customer is different.
And you mentioned quite a few of the Evolution Mining sites there. How independent is Cowal compared to the corporate? Do you get much push from corporate, or is there quite a bit of independence at Cowal?
I think there's a bit of still a drive. As I mentioned, Cowal is a flagship operation, so there is always a focus given from Evolution point of view, and there's still within the corporate boundaries, there's still a lot of flexibility and freedom.
You've recently implemented IntelliSense, which uses machine learning in its solution. Alex spoke about the hype around AI and in particular garbage in, garbage out. How have you taken the approach to make sure you've got the fundamentals or the first principles in place before rolling out something like IntelliSense?
Yeah, in terms of like fundamental, any new technologies before we try, we make sure we have the fallback option or a redundancy in place. So if in case the system doesn't work, what is our plan B? And what we even did with MPA, even though we have the system working, so we still had an option of doing everything in Excel. So if there is a downtime in the system, we still have a backup option. So that's one of the objective of having it. And also when it comes to feeding the right data in, so probably about a couple of years ago, we had Zenco was part of our implementation in terms of operational excellence and productivity. They developed a dashboard or the way of running the meetings, the pre-starts and production meetings called VPC, which is the Visual Performance Center, where we can able to visually present. So each department will present their data in terms of their KPIs. Visually, every team will talk to it. So one of the fundamental things that happened is, as you said, the garbage in, garbage out. So there was a thorough analysis was done and a lot of time put up front to make sure our data is more reliable and robust before we actually roll into that. So that's more important in rolling out the technology.
And that goes all the way back to instrumentation, making sure the right instruments are installed, they're calibrated, maintained, all those sorts of things as well. And how many years was that in terms of a journey?
I believe it's more about like 6 months to journey. Like maybe 6 months was the time they put up front, and then the actual project was rolled out for another 6 months. But as you said, that's all the other fundamentals are more of it's an ongoing practice, but in terms of the calibration, that's part of the meta accounting and preventive maintenance strategy. But just to reflect back and making sure everything is fine was that 6 months process before we start the process.
Alex spoke about the why and empowering leadership in his framework that he presented. What's been your experience justifying technology implementations to your leadership team?
Yeah, so in terms of leadership team, it's more about the justification part comes in. So the KPI is very important in terms of as a business. Where is our safety, performance, and the sustainability on all the other production metrics around throughput, runtime, grade, recovery. So those are pretty important. And also when it comes to return on investment and getting the payback period, less than 2 years is roughly the expectation timeline to get the value back. So that's mainly around the justification that we need to make in terms of getting the green tick before we progress.
Has the 2 years changed with the gold price?
Yes, it would have been still, they will be reasonably okay to take some of those bit more confidently than before. Yeah.
If you take IntelliSense or MPA as examples, did you have to put a business case forward for those?
Yeah, no, absolutely. When it comes to the MPA, it was more around the operational efficiency and the amount of time it takes to respond to any process deviations and upset. So that comes to how the way it has been done was the KPI has been monitored and the operators were able to respond pretty quickly. And it comes down to how does this equates to operational performance equals to improved recovery. So those were the justification. And also similarly to IntelliSense, it's more about reducing the process variability because we got some understanding on the feed coming into the plant, and that can help us minimizing any what they call as the poisoning event of having some incorrect reagents. So those we are able to predict, and they can recommend the set points.
So a good link to strategy, good link to KPIs and business objectives. They had to flow through when submitting those business cases.
Yeah, and absolutely, yeah.
Let's go back to IntelliSense. I think you spoke about how you implemented that in stages. Can you just talk a little bit about why you went in stages? Did you start with a bottleneck? How did that play out?
Yeah, definitely. With any new technology, there is always risk comes along with it. And in terms of assessing the risk, when we are rolling out IntelliSense, it was rolled out in multiple stages and with different exit points along the way. So if the technology doesn't work or we're not seeing the value, we can able to exit. So the whole project was about like 12 months, and with multiple exit points around 3 months. So those were the options we had. And similarly with any other technology, we also run as the pilot scale or sort of the trial before we actually fully embed into our system.
And just thinking back to the theory of constraints, why did you pick the stockpiles to go with first? Was that because that's where there was some buffer capacity, or why didn't you go straight to the mill or flotation or leaching?
Yeah, probably looking at like maybe the triangle where we can able to see the fundamental layer will be more of looking at the feed, what's coming in. So stockpile is more of our hidden constraint. So even though it was not like a bottleneck in terms of the nameplate capacity, we were able to see there was a process variable, like the feed variability that was impacting our whole value chain. And once we understood what was coming in and how it's going to vary, so that's where they started off with the stockpile, understanding the feed component of it. And then now we have a good visibility of what can come into the plant. Then whatever the downstream processes, responses can be updated based on what we feed in. So that's how it comes to start off with that part. So that was stage one. The second stage was the flotation and the leaching. And then now the third stage is they are looking at so we have both open pit and underground feed. So they are not able, they want to test the concept in open pit feed, which was successfully done. So now the third stage is working on the underground feed, which is about 25% of the ore feed. And then the fourth stage, which is already started, is the whole blend optimization. So it's more of a predictive model. So based on what is going to be my recovery and output going to be, I will look at so this is my objective for the year, this is my budget, and this is the production ounces I want to make. Then it can actually give you a predictable, a good feed blend to meet that objective. So that's an overarching vision to reach up to that objective, which will be in another 8 to 12 months, we will be in that situation.
A little bit of change of gears. There's plenty of change leadership models out in the universe. My personal favourite is Kotter's 8 Steps to Change. Alex spoke about early adopters and innovators. What have you seen work well when it comes to configuring a team and engaging stakeholders?
Yeah, with the stakeholder engagement is key for any change management, and also picking up like change leaders or the change champions within the team would be a starting point. And also the best success we have seen was engaging those frontline people on the shop floor people who are very close to the operations, engaging them early is the key part, because as you looked at the impact of having the project cost can significantly vary towards the end if you're not involving the people who are actually going to be that end user. So bringing the end user early in the phase was really worked out well. And that what we did with our IntelliSense is we actually engaged all the operator where have a say in terms of how it has all been initially implemented. We've been making more changes, like constantly we've been tweaking as per the feedback that we've been getting. So the main stakeholder engagement would be having the end user involved as early as possible in the stage.
Included in the project team?
Yeah, included in the project team, and more importantly is to getting their feedback and also having them tapping onto their experience and skills. So as Alex showed, that the whole iceberg model where you can able to see 100% of information sitting at the front line, if you can able to bring that into our project, that will be the success.
Fantastic. One of the steps in Cotter's change model is about reviewing results and celebrating wins. Can you tell us a little bit how you did that at Cowal or in other technology implementations that you've been part of?
Yeah, definitely. With the project, obviously building a dashboard, and we are first starting off with understanding what the KPIs are, and then setting up with the dashboard. One thing again, with the intelligence, we had a dashboard which actually constantly monitor like how much, like what is the compliance of recommended set points is being achieved by the operator, and we can able to see that across different crews. So we can able to constantly monitor how this is performing and how the people are complying with it. And also with the other, it's a feedback option where if operator sees there is a recommended set point doesn't really make sense, there's an option to put a commentary which goes back into them. So it's all about the machine learning. So the feedback, it goes into it and it gets processed by their team, and they will update in their model, and it's ongoing learning that helps with monitoring the progress.
We saw one of the polls that showed that most of us have been involved in a technology implementation that delivered results at the beginning but then deteriorated. What are some tips you can give the audience around sustaining the improvement?
Yeah, that's another big challenge in any operational organization. We spoke about the turbulence, like we have a mindset of most of the operations will be in a firefighting mode. We will just jump from one fire to the other fire. In terms of trying to not revert back to it, so some of the things that we can consider is the operator training. If we can able to embed in our standard operating procedure or having them included in their training manual could be one of the options, and maybe celebrating the wins, as I said, setting up the dashboard, that's the other options. And also the other one is having the in-house capability. That really makes a lot of difference. Some of the technology that's been given to us maybe more around comes as a black box where you can't able to see what's going on, and it actually creates that like the vendor dependency. And having that in-house capability, even though they're not fully experts in that area, that capability can really help us in keep that project going, so that if something goes wrong, there is always people in-house to keep that project driven.
Are there any techniques that Evolution are taking to overcome some of the skills gap challenges that we see in remote operations?
Yeah, I believe there was already ongoing the skill shortage, like they were trying to do that skill mapping and also trying to provide the training, whatever is necessary. And during the previous chat, we spoke about the skill component is one, because usually you in any organization you will have that turnaround of people, and having that solid foundation and the knowledge basis becomes challenging. And that's where there is a bit of a, even though we don't want to have that dependency, but still we expect that a technology supplier to be that person who can able to provide that support and bridge that skill gap. And I think that's we really appreciate you of all the business partner with our technology. Like they've been always available anytime, like maybe when we have any issues with the MPA, like we give a call to Jeremy or Daniel or even Duncan, they're available anytime, and like the response time is really good in terms of the customer support.
That can help. You've described quite a few technologies that you're introducing at Cowal. How are you assessing and managing change fatigue?
Yeah, change fatigue is in terms of what we normally see was like the change is usually not really it's fatigue in terms of how it actually brought to the business. Like one of the examples that we saw was like the Simon's thing, whether it's been pushed onto them or is it like we've been bringing them along the journey. So it really worked out in terms of apart from providing the why for the getting the initial green tick from the management team, also providing that why to the operations team worked out very well. And one of the things with this AI is at the operational level, there is a feeling or what they think is this AI and the new technology can take over their job. So there's a little bit of fear around that, like people, if they are letting all these technologies come into play, like eventually they might become redundant and they may not get the job. So in terms of clarifying and getting that fear off is the first challenge for us, and we've been constantly telling them like it's about how we can able to make their job easier and so that they can able to spend their time effectively in other areas. I think that's the main buy-in for us in terms of telling them how this can make their life easier was a selling point for us, and it worked out well.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit here. 20 years in industry, 4 countries that we mentioned, India, Africa, PNG, Australia, multiple companies, different sizes, multiple commodities, multiple flow sheets. What is something that you see as a common challenge across all of those different experiences you've had, and what is one of the ways that you've gone about solving that?
Yeah, no, thanks for your kind words, Dom. Yeah, I'm really fortunate to be in different countries and multiple operations and different flow sheets. And one thing what I learned over the years is even though you operate across different geographical locations, there's still the human behavior doesn't really change much, and it's pretty universal. And people are really, there's always a friction when you want to change, and there is always a pushback. That's inevitable. One thing we can able to say, depending on where the company in their technology advancement, either the rollout might take shorter or it might take longer at some cases. In terms of it comes back to, irrespective of successful technology rollout, will be coming back to the fundamentals of around the leadership. Because if the leaders doesn't believe in the technology, obviously it's going to be a failure. And in the Alex model, where we can saw the leadership comes as the fundamental part of the change management. And so that's other one is the probably the around the data integrity. So again, that we spoke about, if the company is not efficient and if you're not actually, you're trying to do more of that, and if your data is garbage and you're trying to do something, you're doing more harm to it. So the data integrity would be the second. So leadership, data integrity, and obviously the third point would be to bring those frontline people and the end user earlier in the journey makes a big difference in terms of technology rollout. And for the sustainable change, because we already making a vote saying that always it'll be fine and it'll be successful, but after a while they all go back to the old way of doing things. To have a sustainable change, I believe these are the key ingredients.
Is Peter Tapper still in the audience? No, bummer. I was trawling through LinkedIn profiles this morning preparing for the event, and he had Change Catalyst as his LinkedIn tagline, which I thought was really cool. So we've got a mix of different experiences in the room, from students all the way to people that are wise. I think we said that Eddie's been around for just 28 years in Mipac and then company before that. What are some tips that you can give people in this room that are trying to implement technology, but they're seeing resistance from the organisation or from their leadership?
Yeah, it's a really hard one, and I can strongly believe that every one of us have things which are in our control and things which can be influenced. So when it comes to the influence, and you can see the whole the things are dynamically changing in the industries, and it's very fast paced, and we spoke about the agile things. So it finally comes down to how whatever we are trying to do is going to add value to the organization and what they are trying to achieve. So it also comes down to understanding the strategic alignment. So over the years, what I learned from coming from a metallurgy background, where we look at everything as a technical aspect and try to be more research orientated, and using that skill and having that business perspective of what the company is trying to achieve. So having that understanding would be really key in terms of how we can able to sell that. So in terms of taking this forward to our management, in terms of what would his priority would be, and what is the company is trying to achieve, and trying to align that gap, then we can able to put the business case in terms of how it will add value to it. So it's not about doing the technology for the sake of doing it, but rather than making sure it adds value and it aligns up with our objective. And some companies, and I'm really fortunate to work in companies like Newcrest, where one of their core values is around innovation and technology. Even here at Cowal, we have really great leaders like Joe Mammon and James Didovich, who comes from Tommy Lee Gold Mine. So they're all very passionate about the technology, and so it's really great to be working with those people. So, and they have the metallurgy background, and they have that passion towards continuous improvement. So maybe the final tip would be aligning up with your company and the organizational objective in terms of how this technology can add value would be the way to go from my point of view.
Thank you. So I've had all the privilege of asking many questions so far. I want to open it up to the audience now, and if there's any audience related questions, please feel to chuck up your hand. We might have forgotten to mention that on the polling app, there's also a question and answer tab. If you don't feel confident or comfortable asking questions to the room, you can jump on there and ask questions as well. So any questions from the floor?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, with the current the project strategy, so you get the project funding approved, you roll it out. So we did the commissioning, and there is a structure of tracking the performance for the 12 months before we say the project is success and we can close it off. So what we are looking at is we are trying to understand the baseline. So it all comes down to performance monitoring of the operations, where your recovery, the throughput, and our reagent consumption sits. And that will be the baseline in terms of how it's going up or down. And it's very hard with obviously being a metallurgist, you might know the recovery is one metric that can be influenced by many things, and there is always a chance that it get masked or it get misreported. So having that sense of what I call as a redundancy of sort of a buffer to allow for the variance, and you still capture whatever the positive recovery we are getting. And that's how we've been tracking. But I also understand and acknowledge that it's going to be hard to. So for us, it's worked out in the way the intelligence was rolled out based on the reagent optimization as well. So the unit consumption of reagent, especially around the cyanide or even our the collector, that actually had a direct influence on. We can able to track straight away because it's a kilogram per ton, and we can able to see before and after the implementation. And there is still so the value proposition came based on recovery along with some cost saving come from the reagent. So,
you've also spoken about utilization of that new technology as a metric that you often measure.
Yeah, that's the other thing as well. So how compliant, because you roll out a technology, but if it's not being followed, then we don't really comparing apples to apples. So when we had this compliance factor, so you also make sure there is a minimum requirement of, let's say, 90% of compliance, and then you measure the performance of that.
I'm going to turn the tables a little bit. We've got Diana in the room. Any comment based on your stats? Lens? around setting the baseline and measuring performance of a new technology implementation against what you said it was going to do?
I think a lot of it, maybe, I imagine it touches on, I learnt it, I guess, from the consultant world, that kind of getting back to what are you actually trying to achieve, and that usually helps you frame what is baseline. Because I guess baseline can mean a lot of things to a lot of plants, but it depends, I guess, on, I think, like what are you trying to achieve, what levers do you have, what responses do you have. So if you frame it as effectively almost like a, I guess, a factorial type of experiment and that kind of view, then usually you're kind of on the right track. But there's a lot of nuances, so I would say that a lot of the times, from our experience, baseline is warts and all what is typical in the plant. So you can use kind of the 80-20 principle and use that, but obviously sometimes you're also trying to capture what is typical if you're stable. But I guess, because this could go on forever, going back to, I guess, Joe Peace, what he once said, you can't optimize something that's unstable. So you have to have stability first before you optimize. So ideally, I guess you have a stable baseline, what is typical, even if it's not perfect. Yeah. And then hopefully you use stats. You do pair trial, all that magical stuff. Yeah, and always happy to chat about that.
Very good. Any other questions?
I think I have one question. Selva thought a little bit regarding the use of multiple technique, with the same amount of time. So from my understanding, I know that they don't have a load cell meter, and then at the same time, like they use the control system, like control system, they utilize the load in optimizing. So my question is like, in terms of generalizing or like technique in multiple organizations, so what are the biggest challenges?
Specific to the technology around.
The generalization of the like these the digital transformation technique.
Yeah, that's right, and yeah, probably that's again every flow sheet is different, and Cowal produces the final product will be a gold bullion, whereas the Mipacs have they produce a concentrate, so they don't. So it's every operations is completely different, and in terms of the technology, even though the technology can be the same, but what we spoke about, the baselines and all the implementation strategy should be specific to this organization.
They have products like even some companies they have a product, and then this product some limitation. So when moving from this model, any capacity to large capacity, and then some mine has like mill limitation, some have like line limitation. So in terms of like technological ladder, I'm barely saying people talk about the challenges. You can say like the numbers like data sourcing, data like sensors like consistent, so I think those sort of challenges. My question is around what are the biggest challenges of generalizing those techniques?
Yeah, no, totally. I think as we touched upon the variability, I think that will be the first metric. Make sure we have a stable operation, and all the other input that comes along with it would be a major challenge, which we when we roll out some of the Zenco project, we also looked at all the data coming input to this softwares are correct. So that will be the first challenge, to make sure all our data are reliable and robust. Would be the first challenge to target, and that will be the fundamental to go ahead with it. So
I think the other aspect there is that each site will have its own level of digital maturity. And so being able to understand where you are on that digital maturity journey, what budget you have available, what ambition you have, what timeline, all starts to lead to what you can do at that particular operation. You're working with some form of baseline. And what we heard from Manny about evolution is that they're quite site independent. there isn't that much governance from corporate, and so different sites can do their own things, but there may be a view to standardise across operations in the future as well.
Yeah. In terms of standardization, and you touched upon a few of the other operations. So, for instance, Millrock, even though they have one technology, they are actually customizing to Northbox. So, we are looking at rolling it out, and they are actually having discussion with Mangari. And there are part of standardization, but it might be a lot. So, it's about whether is it really necessary and is it really value adding. So, it's not for doing the standardization for the reason or just for the purpose of doing it. It's just more about is there a value in having the standardization, would also be a question to answer.
Going to have to pause questions there, and we'll need to move on. But we had talked about stats a little while ago, and I remember a professor that I had once. His name's Professor Tim Napier-Munn. A lot of you people probably know him. He used to say, never clap at the beginning because you don't know what you're going to get. And you might have wasted your clap. But if you think you got something out of this chat, please, on behalf of Mipac and everyone here, thank you very much, Manny. I'll definitely clap for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite.